This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Connor, we had a beautiful day on Saturday. It was absolutely gorgeous. Couldn't have asked for a better day for a big game against Alabama. CBS, 2:30. Place was totally packed. It was jazzed. You saw like 80 tents that were up. There were students camping out overnight for 2 nights in a row. And you saw what happened, man. So much of the focus today here on this show from us and from listeners, I think, is focused on what Arkansas did wrong. How much of this goes into the idea that, you know, maybe Alabama just is really good again?
Yeah, there's definitely a few different ways to look at it. And I don't think it's so black and white, because if I told you at this time last week, hey, you know, Arkansas in the fourth quarter of this game is going to have a chance to get a third down stop and get the ball back and have a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter if they can just get a third down stop. If I told you that, you would have been like, oh, sign me up. That's exactly what you could have asked for. And given Alabama's struggles on the road, I brought up the stat 4 of the 5 games that Alabama has played on the road since Bryce Young became the starter, they were decided by 3 points or less. I think if you knew all those things, you'd say, all right, let's go. But then you look at what happened around that, and you'd say that's a problem. And the problem with Arkansas right now is that in addition to Alabama giving it that loss number 2 to drop to 0-2 in SEC play, you realize, all right, this team isn't going to Atlanta. They have such obvious strengths and weaknesses, and that's daunting for the schedule that awaits. And I don't necessarily know that they have all of a sudden a solution to be able to change that. And I think that's kind of where the angst comes from, because I agree, there were some great things that we saw during that 23-point run that Arkansas had to climb back in the game, and you love the way that they fought when you thought it could be 52-7. But I do think that there are a lot of different things that you can dig into on both sides that you come away from it saying, well, this isn't necessarily just Alabama being really good. It's also Arkansas having issues that need to be figured out, and I don't know if they will.
So, I mean, and the issues are you've got extremes on both sides of the ball. You got a pass rush that is normally very effective. Really weren't effective against Alabama, but normally very effective. But almost no tackling right now in the secondary, and coverage has been poor. So those are 2 extremes. And on the offensive side right now, sure, it's a team that runs the football well. And I thought they ran it well against Alabama. I was impressed with the line and with Rocket Sanders. But they're just not clicking in the passing game. You know, and it's real extremes, like very successful running, not successful passing at all right now, 2 weeks in a row. And defensively successful getting to the quarterback. But outside of that, there's not been much success defensively.
It seems like the biggest adjustments that can be made are from a scheme standpoint defensively, and that's up to Barry Odom, who has gotten, 3 different extensions while he's been in Arkansas, maybe 4. I don't know. I've lost track at this point. But you can't put your guys in some of those spots. At this point, if you don't realize that Miles Slusher is not going to be able to cover a guy deep in single coverage, no matter how big of a cushion you give him, I think that's on you. I saw him just get absolutely torched in the first quarter of that game, and without any sort of over-the-top help, you're putting your guy in a really tough spot. Yeah, the player has to be able to execute, and Miles Slusher has struggled to do that. I think this Arkansas secondary without Jalen Catalon, I mean, it's been well documented, the struggles, but that's the biggest holdup that they have right now. Bama, you knew them for their explosive offense last year. It's one thing when Bryce Young has 559 passing yards in that game last year, when all right, they got Jameson Williams, they got John Mechie. Alabama coming into this game had 1 passing play of 40 yards, and it came last week against Vandy when Vandy was in this bizarre coverage at the end of the first half, and they let Jermaine Burton get over the top. They had 3 such plays in the first quarter of this game. Bryce Young was torching them. That's a bad sign moving forward when the SEC quarterback play is really good. And there are a bunch of guys in this conference who can stretch the field that await on that schedule. And while Will Rogers isn't necessarily a big over-the-top guy, he can pick you apart. And that's the issue right now with this team. They have some glaring weaknesses, and Alabama exposed them.
It also feels like, and it maybe not for the first time, but we're really starting to come to the conclusion after simmering in this for the last couple of weeks It's a good group of wide receivers, but man, they really do miss Traylon Burks. And I think it's really KJ misses Traylon Burks. You saw that trust that he had in Burks for obvious reasons last year, and we don't have the sense that he trusts his receivers right now. And maybe there's real reason in his mind for why he doesn't trust them, but there isn't that chemistry on the field right now.
Yeah, that's evident. And look, Matt Landers is somebody that has struggled with drops throughout his career, and developing a rapport with a guy who has that kind of in his background, in his DNA is tough. Jaden Hazelwood didn't come to Arkansas as a separation guy. That wasn't his thing at Oklahoma. That wasn't his thing when he was a 5-star recruit. But he was coming to Arkansas in hopes of being that go up and get a guy. And I think he's had some great moments. I love him after the catch. I think he's so tough. And I think that he's a guy that is a nice complementary player. But for what KJ kind of needs right now and what his skill set is defaulting to is having that go-to guy, and that's not there. And that's why this passing game has these moments where it can just look really stagnant. And you're like, wait a minute, they're not even really trying to do some of these things to be able to stretch the field, to be able to just have, boom, quick RPO slant, get KJ going. Kendall Browse has to figure that out because you can't be one-dimensional and beat a team of Alabama's caliber. We knew that going in. We knew that especially after watching the way that game played out. And they have adjustments to be able to make on both sides of the ball. There's no denying that Sam Pittman has empowered his coordinators in a big way, and it's up to them, and it's up to Sam Pittman as well, to be able to make those tweaks, or else this can turn into 6-6 in a hurry.
And nobody wants that. I mean, it'd be a bowl game, and we'd have to start talking perspective at that point. No, I don't want to be the one talking perspective. But now Alabama's number 1, Georgia drops down to number 2. Look, I think Missouri's a bad football team. They probably should have beaten Georgia. Nerves about Georgia right now because over the first 3 weeks they looked like an offensive juggernaut, and right now, I mean, they kind of struggled back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, I think those first 3 weeks kind of set the bar a little bit too high for where Georgia was actually at. And look, Georgia looked phenomenal. I mean, I'm not taking that away from them. And I saw them in person week 1, and I was really, really impressed with how fired up they were, especially defensively where they had the 8 new starters. But these last couple of weeks, it's been a rough go, and we're kind of seeing the flaws in Georgia. And they're a team that's dealt with injuries at the receiver positions. And as great as those tight ends are, you need receivers if you're going to execute this Todd Monken offense. And they just don't necessarily have the guys right now that Stetson Bennett trusts, that he feels like can be possession guys for them, that can take the top off of the defense and kind of give that offense an exhale. So they've had to do some things mid-game. I mean, they mixed up their running game scheme at halftime of that game and went to a different approach to be able to get some of those big plays in the ground game. And this is a team that, in my opinion, is still one of 3 that can win a national championship. That list has never been more obvious. I mean, 60 of 63 AP voters have Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia in their top 3. I mean, that's crazy. It's never been more evident, the top tier. But the top tier is going to have some of these moments. And Alabama had the moment against Texas. Ohio State couldn't distance itself from a Notre Dame team that it now looks a lot worse. And Georgia's experiencing this right now, and it just didn't necessarily experience this the way that many would have assumed that they would to kind of start off the year. And now they're realizing where their shortcomings are.
Mm-hmm. Connor, elsewhere in the SEC, I don't know if the question about Ole Miss was answered, but is Ole Miss for real now, or did Kentucky just give it away?
2 things can be true at the same time. Kentucky wins that football game, and like 6 different things happen. I mean, it's crazy. Like if Will Levis snaps the ball 0.1 seconds later, they don't have an illegal procedure penalty with the guy not getting set. Dane Key has a go-ahead touchdown in the final minute of that game. If he doesn't fumble earlier on that play, wherein he picks up the first down, if Kentucky is able to not give away 5 points in a kicking game, if Berrien Brown doesn't trip on that kickoff return wherein he looked like he had a walk-in touchdown, he trips over his own guy, like all these different things. Credit Ole Miss, because Ole Miss's defense is stingy. And that's the thing I didn't think that they would have this year, replacing DJ Durkin and all the different guys they lost in the back end of that defense, and they look good. I mean, they're put in the right spots. Chris Partridge deserves a lot of credit. I know he went viral for the video of him he's got his belly going on the celebration video. I'd love to see that. But this defense has gotten a lot better. And even on a day in which the Ole Miss ground game was held to 80 rushing yards in the final 3 quarters of that game, and Kentucky, I thought, was the better football team, Ole Miss found a way to win. And that's kind of all you can ask for at this stage with 30 new faces on that roster, 2 new coordinators as well. I just think that Lane deserves a lot of credit. They're in a position where they could start off 8-0, and it wouldn't be that surprising. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of what they're staring at right now with the way that the schedule sets up. So from that perspective, I'd say Ole Miss is for real. We'll wait and see if they're a 10-win team.
Staying in the Magnolia State of Mississippi, and another thing that where 2 things can be true at the same time, did we once again overhype A&M and once again, under-evaluate exactly how good Will Rogers, Mike Leach, and State was going to be this year?
Mississippi State's really good. They're really good. It's for those who are upset about putting them in the top 25, I'm like, no. That just tells me you haven't watched them play football yet. And Arkansas fans, this is a difficult team to prepare for. Not just preparing for the air raid, because, by the way, they're running the football now. They ran for 144 rushing yards against A&M, a pretty good A&M defense the other day as well. And they'll do that. I mean, I think I even saw Leach run the ball on 4th and 4 at one point. I was like, what's going on here? So from that perspective, they're different. And they also have a really solid defense, man. Like 17 guys of their 22 on their 2 deep are in year 3 with Zach Arnett's defense. We talk all the time with Arkansas about the stability of coordinators, how important that is. That's huge for what Mississippi State's doing. If you don't know the name Jet Johnson yet, you absolutely should. He was everywhere against A&M. Emmanuel Forbes is one of the most underrated corners in the country. I assume he's going to be on Jaden Hazelwood in this game. This is a difficult matchup for Arkansas to have to go on the road. Cowbells are going to be rocking. A Mississippi State team that's darn good. I mean, this could end up being their best team since 2014, and I don't think it would be particularly surprising. They are set up really, really well with the things that they do on both sides of the ball. They have had one bad quarter of football, the 4th quarter against LSU. Otherwise, they'd be undefeated in the top 15 right now.
So we had another 2 coaches let go over the weekend, Paul Christ, Carl Durrell. I'm looking at Auburn's schedule. They get a bye week. Then it's Georgia on the road. Then it's Ole Miss on the road. Then it's Arkansas at home. Does Harsin make it to coach against Arkansas? I don't think he will.
No, I don't think. I think he's. Well, they got Georgia this weekend. He'll be gone after this weekend. I think that's a measuring stick game. And Kirby has been the Grim Reaper for SEC coaches at times. Butch Jones saw 41-0 against Kirby 2017. Jim McElwain's final game as Florida's coach before the fake death threats against Georgia, against that Kirby Smart team. I think the same will be true when Auburn travels to face the Georgia team that should be pretty upset with the way that it's come out. Who knows? Maybe Georgia will play down to its competition, and we're going to be like, wow, does Auburn actually have a chance? But then you remember, oh, wait, Auburn has scored 21 points in the last 8 second halves against Power 5 competition. 21 points in the last 8 second halves. That's almost impossible. I mean, Bama had 21 points in the 4th quarter against Arkansas on Saturday. Like that's what we're talking about here. It's bad. It's continuing to get worse. That was the most obvious blown 17-point lead. I mean, the last time they led by 3 scores was the Mississippi State game last year where they're up 28-3, and they blew that one too. So, look, I think this is just all setting up for Brian Harsin to be replaced, and this time next week we'll be talking about Auburn replacement.
Interesting for sure. So it's 5 coaches already this year. I don't think you had 5 coaches lose their job until late October last year. So, I mean, it's just coming earlier and earlier and earlier. I don't want to ask you who's next, but, I mean, it's all about, you got to win. You got to win games, right? They're not just going to keep somebody around just because they're still the coach. Is this a matter of the transfer portal? Is that why we're seeing coaches let go earlier so that they can zero in on the right coach and then work on recruiting through the transfer portal specifically? I mean, what do you glean of the reason why we're seeing so many early season firings?
It's all about the early signing period. I think that's got a big part of it. And instead of having these coaches recruit and then kind of having to like undo the recruiting and whatnot, there's like, all right, we're just trust that for the next 2 months, even though we're not going to be able to hire a head coach, just trust that we're going to be able to figure things out. How much that actually makes a difference, I don't really know. I mean, you could point to different examples and say it doesn't make a much of a difference, but think about this. So I have a new rule proposal out there. I have this column coming out Saturday Down South tomorrow that athletes or players on teams who have their coach fired before November, they should get a free year of eligibility. The year of eligibility shouldn't count against them, in my opinion. We should just treat it like the 2020 COVID year because it's kind of ridiculous if you look at it. Like there are of the 11 FBS head coaches in the last 2 seasons that have been fired before November, 9 of them had 3 losses or less at the time of their firing. So think about that. I mean, if you're a Power 5 team, you can go to a New Year's Six Bowl at 9-3. And, at the same time, it's like if you're bringing these coaches back and you're firing when they're 1-2, like what did you think was going to happen going into the year? Did you think your team was going to the playoffs? So I think it just kind of robs these guys of a year of eligibility, and I think that's a bit ridiculous. But, yeah, it's happening earlier than ever. We're going to be probably at like 7 or 8 before November even hits. I mean, it's kind of insane the way that this is all set up.
Football is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player news, and game trends. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events like MLB, MMA, tennis, boxing, and even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.